Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Welcome as we dig deeper into your weekend here on the Powerhouse Blowtorch Signal, Talk Radio 77 WABC. Always proud to be broadcasting from the center of the universe, New York City, to the nation, the world, and I'm sure well out into the cosmos. Welcome to another Dr. Sky Experience, a show, if you're a first-time listener, and if you're a regular listener, just to remind our audience, that digs deeper into the mysteries of the universe, from astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. By now, those are our regular listeners. You know that we call this a sort of theater of the mind, where we hope that everybody can learn something new from our great guest and to you, the callers that participate in this show. We love it with the concept of critical thinking, with the conversation and dialogue. The contact number is always 1-800-848-9222, or simply 1-800-848-WABC. And always reminding you proudly to download the WABC app, because if we're a sort of a theater of the mind, imagine the other rooms in this big mansion that you can explore. And there's lots there, I can assure you. In just a moment, we'll give you some good information, as always, about tonight's special adventure. But first, I'd like to thank our helmsmen, Bill and Ian, for navigating all of the calls that do come in here to this Theater of the Mind. And as we talk about this particular month, don't we wish that we really could have Christmas in July? The dog days of summer continue in force. Temperatures on the other side of the pond, as they say, near London, England, 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Here in Phoenix, my hometown now, 117 degrees Fahrenheit, as the heat dome continues, no matter where you are in the northern hemisphere. And also in the eastern Pacific, hurricanes are starting to brew. Hurricane Fausto continues to move deeper out into the ocean, and hopefully not to hit Hawaii anytime soon, and a new one, Hurricane Genevieve, also spawning upwards of 85-mile-an-hour winds, while Hurricane Fausto is in the triple digits. A brief explanation of an introduction to tonight's adventure. 50 years ago, NASA led the way in both manned and robotic spacecraft. While their legacy is still amazing, the future of space and space travel and all kinds of space technology has been centered around many young entrepreneurs in the private side of space and the space business. Tonight, we'll explore one such company and their quest in the new space capitalism, the entrepreneurial path to the stars, as I like to call it. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, a true rocket scientist to lead the conversation. Who are we going to be speaking with? Ben Nowak, CEO of a company called Reflect Orbital. Their website, reflectorbital.com. He and his co-founder have put together a most amazing company talking about practical uses for sunlight. And while Ben was in college, he led the development of multiple Crew Dragon propulsion validation systems at SpaceX. That's the rocket science part of it. And appeared on TV shows like Myth and Mythbusters and The Search. And instead of returning to SpaceX for a third internship, he decided to work in more of the private sector. But Reflect began with a simple thought. Could you build a company to transport sunlight from places it's not needed to places that need it most? The answer was too obvious to ignore, so Ben left a company called Zipline and partnered with his partner, Tristan, and began building Reflect. With that, it's a privilege and honor, and ladies and gentlemen, an opportunity for you to speak with a true rocket scientist as we welcome Ben Nowak to the Dr. Sky Experience. Sir, thank you for being with us. This will be an exciting 2 hours for you and our audience, and most important, for those that have questions. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on the show, Dr. Sky. Really excited to be here.
I appreciate you. No, thank you so much. You know, I say this to the audience proudly, that we're going to be doing a series like this and speak with many other people like yourself if they'd like to come on the air, because so many people in our busy lives, they really never hear about what really goes back. In other words, if you were in the world of gastronomy, great creation of great cuisine, it's like talking with a chef, and I say that very proudly. Tell us more about your background, how you got started in this, and I'd like to dive into at least your experiences. Very proud to talk about it with SpaceX and Crew Dragon. When did you get the inspiration to even talk about this? Because you weren't born, I'm sure, without being nosy. Maybe you weren't there when the Apollo 11 astronauts landed on the moon. You weren't even around then, right?
I wasn't around then, but I grew up watching documentaries about science and a lot of YouTube videos, like science YouTube creators like Veritasium and Smarter Every Day and folks like that building really cool stuff. And I actually started making things in high school. I built a fusion reactor in high school, X-ray machines, tons of drones, YBCO superconductors. I actually liquefied air, made my own telescopes, many things like that.
Wow.
All in high school. And that's kind of what got me into science. I saw a cool thing and I wanted to make it myself. And, sometimes I would go to the dump and take apart a lawnmower or something like that and turn it into a steam engine. And one thing led to another. And, just started building crazier and crazier things. That's what got me into SpaceX in the first place, is just kind of this love of building things and engineering, and just kind of kept taking it one step at a time, kept making crazier and cooler things. And here we are.
Well, kind of like a Thomas Edison. I mean, if you think back of his legacy and so many other people that literally from the engineering side, how would we be today if we didn't have what was then the most popular form of light, this particular filament bulb. And now we're talking about LEDs. So in the same genre. I mean, but I got to ask this, and I get very few people that I can listen to. Like, I'm happy to hear what you have to say on this. That's why we have you as a guest. What is that special thing about somebody, like we talk about Elon Musk, yourself? I mean, there's got to be inspiration. It's like an inspiration thing. You're born with it, I guess. You can study all you want, but some people just have the inspiration. Describe, in your opinion, that whole concept that I brought to the audience.
Yeah, I was really inspired by Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla back in the day and some of the crazy projects that they would work on. And one of Tesla's ideas that really stood out is, like, he wrote this paper about splitting the earth in half with a bunch of explosives and, like, crazy, just harebrained things like that. And I think there's something to that kind of thinking. It's like, what is the craziest thing I can do? What is the loudest thing I can do? How could I, transport electricity from one place to another? How do I do it with these wires? What can alternating current do? I think there's like a curiosity mixed with an exploration that people like that really have. And then I think when you mix it with a lot of hard work, you get something really special as well. I think one thing Thomas Edison did that was really cool is he built, hundreds or thousands of light bulbs, I think they say in the stories, and none of them worked. Like, literally all of them broke. They were all terrible. And I had many similar experiences building things that did not work many times. And sometimes the thing actually never works. Sometimes you'll build something 10 times and the 10th one still does not work. And maybe, you just need to keep going until you build 1,000 of them and then you get one working. So I really related to that kind of feeling and that kind of curiosity. And I don't know, the idea of, like, having crazy ideas and seeing if you could make them real. I don't know, the Tesla splitting the earth in half thing was always kind of interesting because it's like, you can go and do the calculation on what that's going to look like, but, like, how much is it actually going to take? Like, how do you do that calculation? What's the geology of it? What's all of that? There's so many interesting problems that you kind of get into when you think of something on that crazy scale. I don't know, it always just kind of interested me that you could do that sort of thing because it's so different from what normal people deal with. And obviously it's something that you would never do, but I don't know, it's just a good thought experiment. And embarking on adventures like that, like kind of the mind or, of math and science, and really having some fun with it was always interesting to me when I was a kid. And, I always wanted to learn how everything worked. And, you'd always hear stories about how they had this brain, CAD where they could play with ideas and, like, see how machines fit together within their own brains. And I kind of always had that. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm similar to them in this way. And, like, maybe it's worth spending time getting really good at this because maybe I have, some of the same things going on in my head that they have had going on in their heads. And that kind of, like, kept me working on it, kept me working hard. And then, I don't know, just the curiosity, like, wanting to know how every single thing worked, wanting to know how everything was built. That kind of laid a foundation where I could, really put things together and really come up with new crazy ideas. And, sometimes I would, like, tell an idea to my friends that would kind of be a joke, like, oh, I'm going to make a gas-powered flashlight, and everybody would kind of laugh. And it's like, that's so silly. It's almost like,
how
what
can
is
that
the
happen,
most
right?
yeah, it's like, what is the most useless thing I could come up with? And then, like, okay, what is the most useful thing I could come up with? I don't know, just kind of like playing around with ideas like that.
It's amazing.
It was really fun. Yeah.
And a rare opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to speak with your questions as we move into the theater of the mind here. Many seats are empty right now. But it's a rare opportunity, as I said before, to speak with and listen to the stories of the young entrepreneurs that are building this whole new generation of space and the space technology. 1-800-848-9222. Your questions, of course, we'll be getting to in just a moment. And again, this is amazing because, Ben, I look at the legacy of Nikola Tesla. I mean, what a shame. I mean, if you really look at it literally, the things that he could have done. And that's a strange story. I mean, the poor guy, not to center the whole show on that, but he had so many genius ideas like wireless transmission. But what do you think the sad part about what happened to him was? I mean, what was it? He didn't have enough funding. The government didn't want him to do these things. I know I'm a little bit beyond what we're going to talk about, but I want to talk about the genius of Nikola Tesla, in your opinion. What kind of stopped him from completing these different tasks that he developed so many great things on the books?
I think he was just really into building new things and not as into starting companies. More into inventing a thing than writing a patent about inventing the thing. And I could kind of see that. I definitely have a lot more fun making stuff sometimes than I do on the rest of the company things. But the company things are so important to actually, starting a business and making something extremely successful. And
sure.
I don't know, I've spent time developing those skills and they've really paid off. And I think, Tesla just didn't spend as much time developing those skills because he didn't care. And it's kind of I think Paul Merlucky said this very recently. If you want to be an engineer and build really cool things, go and work for somebody else. If you want to deal with nonstop nonsense tasks, start a company. And I think that's very much true. I think Tesla didn't want to deal with nonstop nonsense tasks. And so he never did. And honestly, a lot of people tell the stories that he died alone and poor. And honestly, maybe that's what he wanted. Like, that might have been preferable, and that's fine. And a lot of people, live lives and die, with a normal amount of money or very little, or have families, and that's all they wanted, and they're really happy about it. Maybe he was really happy about it. Maybe he didn't want to make, millions of dollars by selling his ideas and dealing with all the stuff that comes with that. Maybe he preferred something else.
True.
And we'll never really know, but yeah.
No, it's interesting. Our special guest, Ben Nowak, CEO and co-founder of a company that we're going to dig into very heavily here with your questions and comments at 1-800-848-9222. The company is called reflectorbital.com. But let's talk a little bit more about trading there. That's a fascinating show. And can you tell us a bit about that, Ben?
Sorry, you broke up for a second.
No, I'm sorry. I was asking you about...
I can't hear you.
Did we lose you?
Yeah, I lost you for a second there. Sorry about that.
Okay, continue. I was just asking you about Mythbusters, if you can hear me. Go ahead, please.
Oh, back in the day, yeah. Yeah, it was between my SpaceX internships. I got on the show Mythbusters The Search, which was a ton of fun. I got to actually be on, a TV show that was one of my dream TV shows growing up. I used to watch basically every single episode of Mythbusters. I think I've seen them all probably 2 or 3 times over. It was a huge inspiration for a lot of my early builds. I think Mythbusters and Top Gear were both equally big inspirations because you had these people who, would just kind of have a crazy idea and then just go figure out how to build it. And they built so many random things from so many different concepts that was like, how do you even make something like that? Like, how do you even test an idea that crazy? And they would just jump in and do it. And I think seeing so many examples of things getting built, in crazy directions, was really inspiring for me. And it was really cool to actually go and be on that show. It was kind of fun. It was right between my first SpaceX internship and going back to school. And I actually got thrown off of the show after 2 episodes. It was like a competition show. And it was actually lucky because I got to go right back to school right after. And if I stayed on for one more episode, I would have had to skip that semester of school. And who knows what would have happened. Yeah.
Interesting. I hope you can hear me clearly, and so the audience also. That's most important to us here on the Dr. Sky Experience. But describe to us, as I'm describing you as a real rocket scientist, and I say that proudly because the opportunity to speak about this, describe the Crew Dragon propulsion system and describe Crew Dragon with SpaceX. And I got to ask you, it's a side question, had you had many encounters with Elon? That would be an interesting way to start.
Yeah, I didn't see Elon too much. He would just walk by every once in a while. Luckily, I think seeing Elon a lot is a recipe for getting fired very quickly. that guy is extremely serious. But yeah, I worked on the Dragon vehicle, which brought astronauts to the International Space Station. So when people think about SpaceX, they think about the Falcon 9 rocket that comes back down and re-lands, but they usually don't see the Dragon vehicle very much. And unless you've seen pictures of it on the ground, you're not really going to see it in space because, like most satellites, you don't see them. But they're up there flying all the time. It has a potential mission lifespan of a couple of years, and it has 16 thrusters all over it, so it can move around in space, change directions, all of that. It has star trackers, so it can figure out where it's pointing, so it can fly very accurately. And then it also has very fine and precise control, so it can dock with the International Space Station, unload crew, unload cargo, all of that. And it also has safety systems. It has abort systems. It was also designed from the ground up to be able to land on planets like Mars. So it actually had its abort system inside the capsule, and it could use that as a landing system. So it could land on Mars or something like that with very, very powerful rocket engines, much more powerful than you typically have in a satellite like that. So it was a crazy vehicle, and it's flying around kind of like an airplane. It can do all the normal maneuvers an airplane can do up above the atmosphere. And I don't know, it's just such a beautiful thing. And I got to work on some automated test equipment. That was one of the final stages of approval before astronauts would fly the ISS. And I don't know, it was just an unbelievable experience doing that. I got to, work with a team of folks, spent a bunch of money, built some really cool hardware, and it's been in use for a while now since then. So that was, I don't know, very, very cool to get that experience and work with so many smart people over at SpaceX.
Well, I'm so much in passion, I should say, with the whole story of what you're talking about here, because the rocket motors, this is interesting. Robert Goddard, of course, we go back way into the historical side, launching these tiny rockets. Look where we are today, like the Wright brothers, obviously. In 1903, look where we are today. But describe propulsion on something like Crew Dragon. I mean, what's the elemental particles that make this thing work? What do you use to make the rocket motors go? Just describe that to the audience, because a lot of people have no idea, I'm sure.
Yeah, Dragon uses a very special kind of rocket engine that uses hypergolic propellants. So it uses monomethylhydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide, which are these two extremely hazardous chemicals that immediately light on fire when you combine them together. And they'll even light on fire if you combine them together in a vacuum with no air around at all. And that's great for a rocket engine. Yeah. And we put them in these Draco thrusters, or the Super Draco thrusters are the ones for abort and landing. And you basically combine them together, put them through a nozzle made of a very special metal, and you get some thrust. The Draco thrusters were actually quite powerful, around 90 pounds of force coming out of these guys. And they're quite little. They're about the size of a water bottle. And there's, clusters of them all over the place, pointed in different directions, so you can get roll authority, yaw authority, pitch authority, and just move the spacecraft around. You can either raise or lower your altitude with the thrusters.
That's amazing. We'll become a long way from the Saturn V, the big F1 engines, as you know, with the kerosene and liquid oxygen days. So this is really what? This is cutting edge, obviously, technology that you're talking about with what you did with SpaceX. And it's so fascinating because now we're talking about what? The rocket motors that Elon's using, the Raptor. Isn't it correct? It's still using liquid oxygen, but it's also using what? A liquefaction form of methane. Is that a fair statement to say on his rocket motors and the big 33 cluster on the giant Starship? That's amazing.
Yeah, the Raptor is liquid methane and liquid oxygen. And the really cool thing about those engines is they have the fuel pumps integrated into the engines. And in order to spin the fuel pumps, usually what a rocket engine will do is they'll spin a turbine and then dump the exhaust from that overboard. But what's special about Raptor is they'll actually use that exhaust in the engine. So they'll actually have the turbines that spin the pumps like upstream of the combustion chamber. They'll light them on fire, burn them, all of that at a very high pressure, and then they'll inject that exhaust gas into the engine and then use that to burn. And they'll do that on both the fuel pump and the oxidizer pump. So you have fuel-rich and oxidizer-rich exhaust products, and that's what you're recombining in the Raptor engine. So it's this kind of full-flow staged combustion that's incredibly efficient. And in the actual combustion chamber, you have very hot gas reacting with very hot gas, which happens incredibly quickly, and that's how you get extremely high efficiency out of these engines. And it's so hard to get this working because you need to get all stages of this lit at the same time. You need to get all the pumps spinning at the same time. You need to get all the pressures exactly right. Otherwise, the whole thing could blow up or overpressurize, or something won't be spinning at the right rate. So it took a lot of development in order to get this working properly. And the alloys to burn ox-rich propellant at these high temperatures are also incredibly hard. Most metals will actually just light on fire and burn. So you need to come up with very special metals and coatings in order to protect against that. And SpaceX did all this development over a number of years in order to make the Raptors what they are today. The Merlin engines on the old Falcon 9 didn't have these features. And they actually were about 9% less efficient, at least, because of that exhaust they were dumping over the side from the gas generator.
Well, folks, we're almost at the bottom of the hour here, and it's, as we know, in radio and television, we call it the hard break. But before we go to that, this is interesting. If you're just tuning into the Dr. Sky Experience, a rare opportunity to speak, that is you, the audience, as we call it in the theater of the mind, your questions about what's happening. But the most important part of this interview for the hour and a half that will continue on with our special guest, Ben Nowak, CEO and co-founder of a company called Reflect Orbital, reflectorbital.com. Very interesting story, folks, because what they're about to talk about in the next half hour or so, and then to second hour, is this whole company that's going to utilize sunlight and do something very unusual with that to help us down here on the Earth in these troubled times when we talk about, in many people's minds, like we had a guest yesterday, talking somewhat about climate, reality, climate crisis, as many people may describe it. So this, a very important segue. So, Ben, this is interesting. Reflectorbital.com. How many years has the company been in existence? I'm just curious.
We started the company back in 2021. So it's been about 5 years. Yeah.
Very nice, my friend. Yeah, it's just awesome because when I'm looking at your website right now, reflectorbital.com, I'm going to get into a really detailed discussion of the whole concept because this is not something new, no disrespect to you and the company. There were proposals, as you know, Herman Oberth, talking about this concept of putting mirrors in space way back about 1929. But unfortunately, until you have come along with your company, there haven't been anybody really taking that seriously and getting the funding to develop this whole concept, which I find very fascinating. We'll continue, as we're not at that hard break right now, but just a quick little intercession. I usually do this, Ben, and describe some of the things that are happening in the heavens for our fans that love what's in the nighttime sky. And as we do that right now, before the hard break, the sun occupies the zodiac constellation Cancer right now. The moon, if you go take a look at it, wherever your skies are clear, hopefully they are if it's nighttime, the moon is about 11.64 days past the new phase, and it lies in a constellation which many people say is the 13th sign of the zodiac, something called Ophiuchus. So if you're looking out there into the heavens, sometimes, right, Ben, with all this big heat dome across the country, we kind of wish that we had something called Christmas in July, but we can do that on our own. And there's so many wonderful things to talk about when it comes to the deep story of space, the development. And I got to ask you, in about a minute or so, who of all the people that you've studied in the whole space program really is one that gets your attention the most? If you had to pick one, who would you say?
I would have to say the folks at K2 Space or Apex Space are definitely up and coming and really exciting. They're in the Los Angeles area as well as us and building some really cool satellites.
Wow, fascinating stuff. And we continue just on the other side of the hard break as we talk about this. So many things happening in the world of privatization of space. As I mentioned before, the new space-age capitalism, the entrepreneurial path to the stars, where many people, maybe 50 years ago, would never believe that today private industry is really leading the way. Kudos to people like, of course, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, yourself, and so many of these other companies out there that are taking drawings and making them a reality, which is totally incredible. But I think it sums it up best this way, Ben, from my side. I think imagine, believe, and achieve. What would you say to that simple three sets of words there? How would you respond?
Absolutely. You can do anything you put your mind to. If you can imagine it and you have the work ready to go and you're ready to put in the effort, you can do really anything. Yeah.
More with Ben Nowak here on the Dr. Sky Experience, 1-800-848-9222. We see your calls coming in, and we will be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Cross the boundary. the unknown, where gravity bends the light and time itself stands still. This is the edge of existence, where everything ends and eternity begins. Past the event horizon, there is no turning back.
There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than an image that Carl Sagan talked about planet Earth, the pale blue dot. 32 minutes after the hour, we welcome you into our Theater of the Mind and the Dr. Sky Experience. Always great guest, as you tell us. My email, if you'd like to send me one, I do respond, drsky@wabcradio.com. Ben Nowak is the CEO and co-founder of a company called ReflectOrbital.com. Thank you, Ben, for spending time with us. And now the phone lines are lighting up as people are coming into the Theater of the Mind. Let's say good morning to, on line one, Robert in Philadelphia. Good morning, Robert. You're on with Ben.
Hi, Dr. Sky. As always, a wonderful show, and I really appreciate another wonderful guest, Mr. Nowak, tonight on to speak to you. Real quick, before I get to my question, I hear you talking about Tesla, and I was always a Tesla fan.
Yeah.
Edison might have designed the first industrial lab, but Tesla had a remote-control boat in 1898, and that's just too cool. But when they seized his records after he passed, a team of MIT-trained scientists reviewed his work, and that team was headed by an electrical engineer named John G. Trump, who was Donald Trump's paternal uncle.
Yes,
so it's really a small world, you know.
It is.
My question pertains to, real quick, what is the feasibility of solar cells, and how long before we have nuclear-powered rocket engines?
Wow, powerful, Robert.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
can
Ben.
answer that.
Yeah.
We're building vehicles that are very similar to solar sails, and we took a lot of inspiration from a lot of the solar sail programs that NASA and JAXA did over the years. And one in particular comes to mind is the Icaros satellite that they launched, and that one actually solar sailed past Venus back in the early 2010s. It had a spinning reflector that was super thin, and it was spinning in order to stabilize it. It didn't have booms or anything like that. There were no compressive members in the structure, and they actually used little LCD screens to steer it. So you could turn the LCD screens on and off, and the solar pressure would then either go through or bounce right off, and it would use that difference in force to steer and actually point itself around. So a super cool little vehicle. That's the best example of solar sailing actually working. I know we do a lot of calculations with solar radiation pressure included in our satellites, and I think we're going to be able to really see the effects of it with our vehicles because they're so large. It's about 160 square meters. So it's a pretty big factor in our analysis. And yeah, we're excited to see how that works and kind of prove it out. We're making some of the larger, lighter vehicles that have ever been built. And yeah, we can solar sail with our satellites if we'd like to. We didn't find any customers who wanted to fly along with us. But we're always interested in pushing the limits of science and technology in our designs if there's interest for it out there. And obviously we're getting pretty good at making booms and these thin reflectors, so it's definitely a thing that we can do.
Robert, your follow-up is always appreciated. If you would like, please continue.
Well, I would just submit that everybody talks about Elon Musk's, but there's 1,000 Elon Musks out there, and Mr. Nowak is one of them, and it was a real honor to speak to you, and I appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Absolutely. But one quick thing, Dr. Sky, and I'm not sure
Yes,
if you're aware of this, but AOC actually voted against daylight savings time because she was afraid that the extra hour of sunlight would exacerbate global warming. I'll leave it there, guys. You guys have a great weekend.
And, of course, Robert, to add to kind of some humor to the radio show, and I think Ben would appreciate this, accordingly, the North Koreans estimated that when they landed on the sun, they did it at night. Now, that is ridiculous, but that was actually on their news service. I don't know if you heard that, Ben. It's kind of crazy, isn't it?
That's hilarious.
And they did it at night, but that must be amazing. So the dark side of the sun must exist. We continue on line 2. Let's say good morning to Nick in Virginia. You're on with Ben Nowak of Reflect Orbital, and we will talk about his company. Believe me, we haven't even gotten to the best part yet. Good morning, Nick. You're on the air.
Good morning, Dr. Sky and Mr. Nowak. I don't want to sound like someone from the 12th century. We're claiming that if you sell your ship too far, you're going to fall off the end of the earth. But I have some doubts about space travel by humans.
Okay.
And my biggest concern is how we're going to produce air in space. Oxygen, I understand maybe you can extract some oxygen from ice, but how are we going to produce air, which is 80% nitrogen? And I see this as a huge problem, and maybe you're going to shoot it down with something I don't know about, but I can see space travel only done by robots beyond the moon.
Interesting.
So what do you think about that?
Ben, I
International
think,
Space.
brings up some good points.
Yeah, on the International Space Station, they have a bunch of recycling equipment so they can recycle the air that the astronauts are breathing. And they do still bring some air up, but most of it is fully recycled. So they'll recycle the water, they'll recycle the air. They have CO2 scrubbers and all of that up on the station. And we're getting really good at it. People have been up there, consistently for over a decade. And I think that's what's going to be necessary to go further. You can get oxygen from ice and things like that, and you can do some pretty special chemistry on Mars and celestial bodies like that. You can mine maybe a nearby comet or an asteroid for its water. There's a lot of water on comets, so we'll be able to find things out in space as we go further and further. But there's definitely a lot of really hard work to do and a lot of figuring things out that we'll have to do in order to get there.
Interesting. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate your common sense to the whole story of space travel too. Line 3, we go to Greg, a frequent caller here on the Dr. Sky Experience. He's calling us from Michigan, where it's what? It's not even Sunday morning yet. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Dr. Sky, and your distinguished guest, Mr. Positive Boom Shakalaka. And real quick, in honor of Carl Sagan, to my warriors, as I descend upon your mind, body, and soul, remember, in order to do the impossible, you must see the invisible. I've got to ask Dr. Nowak, when you're out in space and you're traveling, what are the biggest obstacles that one engages in or that comes across when you are in space travel in the rocket? Is it gravity? Is it friction? What is the most salient thing that one has to overcome?
The thing I'm most afraid of is something invisible, kind of to the quote from Carl Sagan that you said. The radiation out in space is quite difficult to deal with, and you need either a lot of shielding or some really durable DNA in your cells in order to make it through a lot of that. So that's what I'm most worried about on distant space travel, is dealing with all the radiation that's out there. Dodging meteors is pretty hard, but luckily you can see them coming from a ways away. The gravity can actually be extremely helpful. You can use gravity to swing yourself around other planets and actually get going a lot faster, kind of like a slingshot. So I would say that's pretty useful. But the radiation itself is almost pure challenge. That's the thing I'm most concerned about. Yeah.
Greg, you have a follow-up? Go ahead if you do, because we're almost up at the next break. Imagine how fast time flies when we're all having fun, right? There you go.
Yes, fantastic show. Everybody go for your dreams.
Hey, love that. And just like we said before, the 3 ingredients, I'm not the scholar on this, but I think common sense, of course, comes to the table in the front of the theater of the mind. Imagine, believe, and then achieve. And it sounds real simple, right, Ben? But obviously not. And if you would describe this, I mean, maybe in your experiences, you didn't really have maybe a lot of time, as you've said, to spend time with Elon. But from what I've read in many of the books that were written, about him, he spent so many sleepless nights, I guess, on the floor, working, sleeping on the floor, just resting on the floor until you get it right. So isn't that amazing? I mean, maybe without me being too forward, maybe you've experienced the same thing. Until you get it right, you're going to keep coming back. Like you said before, there's many failures, but failure's not an option, and not to quote the old space jargon. Tell me about yourself. I mean, you've probably had the ups and downs in anybody's life, but you have to be persistent. That's the point.
Yeah, I work quite hard. Typically like 80 to 120 hours a week. I'll work 16 to 18-hour days pretty frequently. I think that's the only way to do it, and I've been doing that for most of my life. Even when I was back in high school building the fusion reactor and things like that, I would, stay up till 2 a.m., get up at 8 a.m., and get right back to it for just weeks or months straight. And I haven't really stopped since then. I kind of just love doing it. It's, my grandpa always said, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I love making stuff, so I've been able to really put in the time and have a lot of fun while doing it. I think it's, it's really the only way to go. When you find something that's this cool and this fun, and I don't know, when you're able to make new stuff like this, it's like, how could you not put everything into it? So, yeah.
I don't want you to think we're being remiss here, but I haven't even gotten to, and after, we always go to our callers because we respect their time and their interest, which is positive here, big time. But I do want to get into Reflect Orbital. I think we've got plenty of time. In just a couple of minutes, we go to another break. But what's so fascinating about this, you're telling us you built, and this is a short answer from you, I'm sure, with a minute or so. It can't be done. I guess we have to talk more. Fusion reactor. Seems like almost a most difficult thing to build. What was it like doing this? That's amazing.
Well, it was quite hard to get the deuterium from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. That is an isotope of hydrogen with an extra neutron in the nucleus. So that was pretty difficult to get. Another really hard component was the power supply. You need negative 40,000 volts at about 10 milliamps or more. So that was also pretty hard. I actually made 3 or 4 power supplies before I figured out how to get one that was actually working. And then actually, building the reactor taught me how to weld. I had to TIG weld a bunch of high vacuum parts together, and you have to get them perfect and weld on the inside with special techniques so there's absolutely no leaks, not even a microscopic one, or a thing called a virtual leak where you basically trap air in it. It was a lot of fun.
So he became what, a TIG and MIG welder, or there's another iteration of welding. I know people that are welders, but that's a lot of patience to do something. And obviously, not to be a funny guy, you simply don't get deuterium by ordering it off of Amazon. That's for sure. That's amazing. Yeah. How hard is it? You got to go through all these paperwork paths, I guess, to even verify that you're the good guy that you are versus the bad guys that may be out there. Who knows, right?
Yeah, it took about 6 months, but I really wanted to get it, so I kept working on it. Yeah.
Well, here we go with Ben Nowak, ladies and gentlemen. We come up on the next break. Your questions, we see Dave in Pennsylvania, and there's plenty of room in the Theater of the Mind, 1-800-848-9222. Exciting to talk about the positivity of space, the new frontier, never the final frontier, the new frontier, here on the Dr. Sky Experience. We will be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, I'm Don Isles. I worked on the software for the lunar module when it landed on the moon. You're listening to the Dr. Sky Experience.
We are at a point in history where a proper attention to space, and especially near space, may be absolutely crucial in bringing the world together. A quote from the cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead. 48 minutes after the hour as we move through time and space, and we continue, ladies and gentlemen, with your calls, and I promise our special guest, Ben Nowak, the CEO and co-founder of ReflectOrbital.com, we will get into a deep discussion, probably more so than in hour 2 because of the popularity of your conversation. Let's go to line 4. Let's say good morning to Dave in Pennsylvania. You're on with Ben Nowak. How are you this morning?
Hello, pretty good. I was earlier today and for the last 4 weeks or so, earlier today I was at the, basically the Carnegie Main Library in Pittsburgh. I traveled there from outside of Pittsburgh, and I have 44 printouts, approximately. I got more than that earlier at other libraries. The 44 are in Keller. I am trying to make an invention. This ties into your last 2 callers. Trying to get an invention together, which I have in my head, about rich oxygen, nitrogen, argon mixtures being pumped with vacuums into the atmospheres of the Earth to reduce some of the climate change situation and extreme weather, and it can work. The warehouses would be quite large in size. The rich oxygen, nitrogen. Nitrogen is big in food preservation and food freezing and food storage. And
it sounds like, excuse me for interrupting, but you sound like you have some fascinating ideas there. But I would prefer you to do this. If you do this, Dave, send me an email, if you can, with all this detail, and I will pass it over to Ben, of course, if he'd like to receive this. Of course, I think he would. But in the short interest of time, my email again is just drsky@wabcradio.com. But, Ben, from what Dave is talking about, that would require a lot of airtime to go through the definitions. But any guidance from you would be helpful.
Yeah, getting the argon seems like the long pole in the tent with this invention. I know argon is a trace gas in the current atmosphere, so getting enough of it that you could release and make a meaningful difference might take a little while. The other thing is collecting solid science on how this works with the existing atmosphere. Could take a good amount of time. The atmosphere is pretty big and pretty complicated and difficult to analyze. So that'd be the thing that I'd focus my time on, is thinking through that part of it.
Dave in Pennsylvania, thank you for being part of the Dr. Sky Experience. Closing out the hour as we move to the end and conclusion, sadly, of hour one. Another hour to go. Line number one, Gary, you've been patient in Maine. Good morning. You're on with Ben Nowak. And what an exciting hour this has been, don't you think? Wow. A little musical interlude from the state of Maine. That's amazing. The home of Stephen King, of course. Wow, what a guy.
I think that was
but Ben, getting back to... yeah, right. Harmonica and accordion. I have one, of course, the desk here, but I'm not going to go on the air and play it. That's not appropriate for this show at this particular time. So before we really dive into what you're really talking about here, the company, this is interesting. Just whet our appetite, because I don't want to read from this, because it's obviously you're the CEO. You can do it better than I can. Describe the whole purpose of Reflect Orbital, because this is going to be a fascinating second hour, and I'm sure people would want to chime in on what you're looking to do.
Yeah, the sun grows all the plants. We eat plants, or we eat animals that eat plants, and even fossil fuels are created by trees that grew millions of years ago that died and turned into fossil fuels and oil, and that's what's powering everything. So all of our food, all of our energy comes from the sun, and it's really the most important thing in our solar system, the most powerful resource in our solar system. And half the time when it's night out, like right now, we don't have access to the sun, and we try to simulate it with things like light bulbs, and sometimes we use oil and things like that, and create energy that way and use that to light things up. But really, if we could just cut through a lot of that and get right to the fundamental source, it could be a lot more efficient in a lot of cases and a lot better for many applications. So that's what we're working on at Reflect Orbital. We are building the technologies to control the sun at night and bring it down to critical applications where it's needed.
That's interesting. And I just want the people to know out there, we'll do this in a deep dive in hour two, that you're a funded company, because a lot of times people think back and they go, and again, I'm not saying this about your company, hardly, that, these ideas are just pie in the sky. No, there's obviously venture capital firms like Sequoia Capital, Lux Capital, Starship Ventures, and I'm sure many, many more that are obviously on this particular path to seeing what you're doing not just become something on a drawing board, the old drafting table, or in the computer 3D simulation now, or, of course, in doing this, on computer manufacturing. This is a real thing, and it's quite interesting, because when I look at this, again, from my astronomy background, there's some people out there that are saying, and I know you'll address this with great fervor, that, oh boy, here comes this beam of light coming down. Oh my goodness, what about our telescopes? And many of people who want dark skies address that, because you take a great amount of time to explain the necessity for dark skies. And I think before we get into this big hour two, tell us about that, because people may already jump to conclusions. Don't. Describe that. You're obviously honoring the darkness of observatories and the dark skies.
Yeah, it's very important that we're able to provide the benefits of sunlight to certain areas while keeping other areas as dark as they were to begin with. And that all comes down to the design of the satellites and how specular the mirrors are and how we fly them and operate in space. So normally the satellites will be completely off and you won't see them at all. And if there's an emergency or a customer that wants light, we'll light that one customer up in a very precise area, and we'll keep the light from spilling into the environment. And all of that is in the design of the vehicles. So realistically, if we're serving a customer that's nearby to another one, you won't even know that it's happening. And that's the way we want to keep it. That's all a requirement of this technology. We're working with the National Science Foundation and NASA and some other groups on getting lists together of all the places that we're going to avoid and make sure that no light ever goes to them, so that we keep our skies dark, we keep our telescopes free of vehicles going through them, and all of that. So we want to get as much benefit as possible with as little negative impact as possible. I think that's really important. Otherwise this wouldn't be worth doing. If it caused all kinds of negative effects, we wouldn't do it.
Right. The benefits are, very, very high on the big scale here. And I read, of course, we don't believe everything we read, right, Ben? On the internet, of course, many articles. And in legacy media, not to attack anybody out there by company or by broadcast. It's just that so many of these stories, in my opinion, I come from the astronomy background and I read some of this stuff. And I'm saying, wait a minute, they really didn't do their homework, in my opinion, on this. So any concerns about this company, Reflect Orbital, doing something to, quote, invade the nighttime sky and remove the darkness is certainly not accurate at all, as Ben, better than I, could explain it. Their website, again, reflectorbital.com. Your questions and comments as we continue on the Theater of the Mind. This is an exciting night, and I do appreciate you staying up with us, Ben. I know you're a busy guy. The contact number here, 1-800-848-9222. And if you have an email, and I know one of the callers before that was asking about maybe how to develop this kind of a invention. I think we were talking with Dave in Pennsylvania. Anybody has an email that they'd like to send me, it's again, drsky@wabcradio.com. And Ben, many of the great listeners that we have, and of course the callers, we've even gotten some good guest suggestions from them, and some of them have actually come to fruition. So it's interesting. So here's a question. Maybe you don't have to answer on this. What's the plans, if you can share it with this audience, of going public with the company at this point in time? Something that you can share with us.
Public like an IPO, like a publicly traded company?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we do have that in the plan. We definitely don't want to go public until we have a lot of satellites up and we're making very consistent revenue. You don't want to end up in a situation where you're developing a technology and you're worried about the stock price. We're very much in the early stages today, and I think we would go public when we had a couple hundred satellites, making a couple $1 billion a year or something like that. That would be a great time to go public, and we're really excited to get there as soon as we can.
Well, look at how long it took SpaceX to do this, obviously. That's a whole different story, too. But again, we're talking about tuning in, folks, on the Dr. of a company called Reflect Orbital.com. And we've been talking, really mean it, at least from my side, and I'm sure everybody out there with positivity. In order to do these great things, imagine, believe, and achieve. Because, again, we've had other guests on here, Ben. One gentleman here whose name I refer to here is Dr. Rainer Zitelmann. That's his name. His big book out there, you may have even seen it, The New Space Capitalism, The Entrepreneurial Path to the Stars. I'm impressed with seeing that have young children or even that are listening. A very
It was a light coming down from the sky. I don't know who or why. Must be those strangers that come every night. Those saucer-shaped lights put people uptight. Leave blue-green footprints that glow in the dark. I hope they get home all right.
always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Thank you so much for spending more of your weekend with us here on Talk Radio 77 WABC. We like to call ourselves, as many would agree, the Powerhouse Blowtorch Signal, as we're beaming out and broadcasting from the center of the universe, New York City to the nation, the world, and I'm even confident, way out to the cosmos. We continue with hour number 2 in what we call Theater of the Mind, an opportunity for you to learn something just like I do every time we bring on special guests from the great realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, and celebrity guests and stories of American exceptionalism. If you haven't heard the number, the contact number to get into our Theater of the Mind is 1-800-848-9222. And as always, proud to say it again and again, why not download the WABC app? Because once you enter the Theater of the Mind, and there's so many other locations that you can enter into the different rooms, I'm sure you will be quite happy. Tonight's adventure, as we continue to speak with him, Ben Nowak, CEO and co-founder of a company called Reflect Orbital at reflectorbital.com, our tribute to space and private space entrepreneurs and space ventures. They're called the Sunlight Company, and we continue on with Ben. Thank you for staying with us, and we do want to go to the callers. And thanks again, Ben. Let's say good morning on line 1 to Max in Manhattan. He's been patient. You're on with Ben Nowak. How you doing?
Yes, Dr. Sky, Noah, thank you for taking my call. This question has to do with the ideas from scientific ideas that are said to come from entities and have entered into people like L. Ron Hubbard and the founder of JPL. What do you think of that, or is that too far out?
Interesting, Ben.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit far out for me. I don't think we understand what's going on there. I do think weird stuff happens sometimes, but I'm not sure if it's entities like L. Ron Hubbard describes. I believe in mostly normal science stuff and a couple little weird things here and there that maybe we haven't figured out how to explain yet. I think that would be a lot of new information if those things are real, and I feel like we'd see a little bit more evidence of them if they were real.
Max, give us your opinion on the privatization of space with these entrepreneurs. I'm impressed to have Ben and so many people that are in this industry right now. They're a lot younger than I am, and they bring to the table, again, kudos to Ben and his company and all the other space endeavors. What's your opinion of all this? Share that with the audience if you would like.
I guess it brings a new shiny impetus to the subject, and if it's not government controls, maybe there's a bit more flexibility. You don't have to worry about what mission was that? The Clementine mission. That was a government agency, and we know very little about that.
Mm-hmm. You're exactly right. Clementine, a long time ago, we were trying to observe the impact there that was supposed to come from that, but, we never got to see it, but that's a whole other story. Max in Manhattan, thanks for being part of our show in our Theater of the Mind. Let's go to line number 2, Alexi in Queens. You're on with Ben Nowak. How are you doing this morning? And I apologize for the so-called sound, Ben, of popcorn popping in the background. We might blame it on a solar flare, but then again, I'm not too sure of that. What would you say? That's
maximum.
Yeah.
Alexi, go ahead, Alexi. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a few brief questions, maybe 2 or 3 quick questions for your guest.
All right, go right ahead.
All right.
These reflecting satellites in orbit, you say they are capable of reflecting sunlight down to the surface of the Earth. What is the maximum area that could be conceivably illuminated by one of these satellites?
Interesting.
Our satellites are lighting up a 6,000-acre area, so it's roughly the size of a large airport, like San Francisco Airport, or about the size of Manhattan. So it's a pretty big area.
I'll say that is pretty impressive from space. And not to take away from Alexi, Ben, what would be the altitude approximation in space of these mirrors? Just describe that so people get a better picture of top to bottom from when the sunlight is sent down. About how high are they in orbit?
About 600 kilometers in altitude. So it's about the distance between San Francisco and Los Angeles, right around the sunrise, sunset hours. If you go later into the night, you want to get up to about 5,500 kilometers, which is quite a bit further. And you need that to stay in the sun and out of the shadow, but still reflect to that exact opposite side of the Earth.
Alexei, continue. I know you had a bunch of things you wanted to ask. Go ahead.
Yes, second question. The sunlight, when projected from the satellite down to the surface of Earth in such an area, as you say, what would be the increase resulting in temperature? Would it affect the climate?
So from our first satellites, they're very dim. So they're much like moonlight. It's about 0.1 lux, which is, it's a couple 100,000 times less bright than the sun at noon, but it's still enough to see. So the heat increase is extremely minimal. It's about 200 kilowatts total from the satellite, which is, about the same amount of heat as charging an electric car.
This is interesting, Alexei. I wanted Ben to comment on this because obviously I'm an observer of the sky, and after this particular radio show, I'll be out there with the telescope doing some lunar observations, which obviously it's nearly a full moon, as you might know. But the point is, the brightness at best would be what? See if I have this right. Not brighter than a full moon, or probably not much more than that. You described that since you're the folks doing this. How would that appear in the nighttime sky as an object if you looked at it as a pinpoint object? What would be the potential brightness?
If we're pointing right at you and you're in the spot because you wanted to be in the spot, then it would be as bright as a full moon. If you're outside of the spot, it would be like if you're right next to it, it'd look like a normal star, kind of star brightness. And if you're a little bit further out than that, it'll be invisible to the naked eye. That's what we're designing them for.
Wow. So that's a lot of technology there because, again, if you read some of the reports, and I'm sure you have, people that haven't done the lengthy research that we're doing here with you, they would think that this thing is like a laser beam in the sky, and it's like, burning up like if you looked at War of the Worlds with the Tom Cruise movie. The tripods that came to Earth had these like plasma cutters. No, it's nothing like that at all. That's why that's science fiction, and this will be science reality. Alexei, thank you for being with us as always. I appreciate your time with us on the Dr. Sky Experience. By the popularity, Ben, of the callers here, I want to get into deeply with you, but I want to keep our callers going. 1-800-848-9222. That's why we have a show here. Line number 3, Rusty in New York. You've been patient. Your question or comment to Ben?
I don't know what happened.
Okay, I'll give it one more time. Rusty, if you're there, go ahead, or we'll move forward. Sorry if the connection's... Go ahead, Rusty, if you're on the air. If not... Okay, let's continue. Go ahead. I'm sorry, you're there?
Yes, yeah. Oh, that's the sky?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead. I'm sorry, we couldn't hear you.
Yeah. Okay, I have two questions. First of all, when the astronauts make a walk in space, when they go outside of the module or whatever,
sure,
and they have these backpacks, and there's no air in space, and it's like a vacuum, and there's no atmosphere. How does the backpacks, where they put on whatever they use, gas, whatever comes out of it, what does it push against to make them move?
That's interesting. Wow. See, because you can't hear a sound in space, so with these backpacks, Ben, he's bringing up something important.
Yeah, it's very similar to a rocket engine. Force equals mass times acceleration. So what you do is you take the gas and you accelerate it through a nozzle. It's actually a thing called a cold gas thruster. And when it accelerates through the nozzle, it's a converging, diverging duct. And you accelerate that gas up to a supersonic speed, so it's moving really, really fast. And when you have the mass of that gas moving very fast backwards, the accelerating backwards, you get a force in the opposite direction, and that's what pushes the astronauts around. That's the same way that rockets take off from on the ground. They're actually pushing the mass backwards very quickly and accelerating it backwards very quickly. They're not pushing against the air as much. And yeah, same thing happens in space. That's how the astronauts move around. They throw gas backwards very quickly, and there's an equal and opposite reaction that pushes them forward.
Rusty, a follow-up from you as we move on. Thank you for your interest in the show.
I have a quick question for you. Is that all right?
Go ahead. That's why we're here.
Okay. All right, good. When capsules and rockets and such, when they go into the atmosphere of the Earth, and they it looks like they're on fire because they hit the atmosphere, and it makes it, the way it glows like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And is that because it's two things? Is that because they're hitting the atmosphere of the Earth, or is it the speed they're coming into it?
So
which does that?
They're moving at about 18,000 miles an hour. You know, the International Space Station is moving at about 18,500 miles an hour. So it's unbelievably fast. You know, several times faster than the speed of sound. And it starts hitting the air when it's very thin, up very high. And it actually ignites the air. It'll compress it to over 1,000 psi, and the heat of that compression is extreme, and it actually burns the heat shield. And they plan on it burning the heat shield. It's this thing called ablation, where the burning of the heat shield actually protects the heat shield under it from getting burned off. Because when it burns and turns into a gas, you get a little bit of a cooling effect. So you're kind of like slowly burning away little bits of the heat shield as you re-enter the atmosphere very, very quickly. And it's quite hot, and it's happening quite fast. But yeah, it's that interaction there. And it's happening so fast that the air, even a couple millimeters in front of the heat shield, doesn't know that it's being hit, or like a couple millimeters in front of the shock wave. The shock wave is like nearly an atom's width across, or a couple atoms width across. So it's just unbelievably fast, and the air in front of it just can't get out of the way fast enough, so you get this crazy heating in front of the shock.
Well, Rusty, we appreciate you, and our goal on this radio show, it seems like we've been successful, Ben, in all of our shows, and especially with you, is to learn something new that we probably didn't know as we go about our busy daytime lives that are ruled mostly by the sun. And we continue to thank Rusty and all the callers. Let's go to line number 1. Billy in Pennsylvania. You've been patient, and thanks for your patience. You're on the air. Go ahead. Billy, you're on the air. Give it a try. Wow. The harmonica, or is that an accordion, Ben? I'm not really sure. One of the two.
It could be a harmonica, yeah. That was another.
But
good
they
one.
don't play enough of the music, though. See, that this is, and we do have a great part of this radio station, music radio, but as we move away from that just temporarily, that continues over the weekend before our shows. Great hosts. Anyway, this is interesting. So what I wanted to talk with you about, and the audience here, if you still have questions and comments, and I'm sure you do out there, 1-800-848-9222. Ben Nowak, the CEO, and, of course, he's a co-founder of this company called, as we talk about, Reflect Orbital, reflectorbital.com. You know, I can think about some really incredible uses for this, and I was thinking about this over dinner before. Let's say the horrific aftermath of earthquakes. And we see so many people around the world, and again, not to go into the geology side of it, the incidence of earthquakes seems to be on a proportional scale like we haven't had before, wouldn't you agree? But the aftermath of these, let's say there's a night event where thousands of people are trapped. That, to me, is the most amazing event, because you could have this light where you could help find and rescue people and animals from the after effects of a horrible earthquake. Describe that. I mean, it's common sense, don't you think, that use?
Yeah, we actually had over a dozen people reach out after the terrible earthquakes that happened in Venezuela a couple weeks back, saying, is there any way you could help light up the rubble? It's really hard to find people at night. The lights aren't very good. They don't light up enough of an area. Could you just, send down some light from your satellites and light up this area? And unfortunately, we don't have our satellites up yet. We're launching our first 2 vehicles very soon here, but they're not up just yet. And we could have made a really big difference there in just a couple minutes and lit up the entire affected area in literally just a couple minutes, so that people could see and actually perform the rescue operations.
Quite amazing. That would be a life-saving use. Obviously, you have it well thought out here. But let me go back into the history of this, and I'd like you to describe it. The physicist Hermann Oberth, he's writing in 1923 and 1929 about this concept of putting these gigantic mirrors in space. Now, the difference between what you're doing and what he was describing, he was looking to have what? Things that are many, many miles across, if I'm correct, in space? I mean, we're talking what? Maybe 100 kilometers? I mean, that seems a little undoable. But carry on with that, because the concept has been around, but your specific and specificity of where to use this is really amazing to me. Hermann Oberth, what an amazing scientist and physicist.
Yeah, nearly 100 years ago, they were thinking about ideas like this. But they foresaw enormous megastructures that would have to be assembled with astronauts or something like that in space, which is an enormous project that we have not done anything even close to yet. We're doing something a little bit different. We're launching a lot of relatively small satellites that deploy their reflectors, from a relatively small satellite. And then once they fully deploy, they can work together to get different brightnesses on the ground. So if you have 10 satellites pointing at one spot, it's about 10 times brighter than one satellite. And it's a lot easier to make 10 little things than one giant thing in space, because it's quite hard to get up there. You can't just weld the thing together. And when people had looked at this before, they thought you're going to have to go and do that. But luckily we don't have to. Luckily we can make small ones and then combine the light from multiple together at the same time. The other interesting thing is you can keep the satellites flat. You don't have to curve them like a parabola in order to get the focusing effect, which makes it a lot easier again.
Interesting. And describe this to the audience. Again, this is theater of the mind, so everything comes in visuals to our mind, of course. But when you're looking at these, are they comparable in size to what Starlink is doing for their type satellites? And we'll get into a discussion later about the latest Starship 13 launch with a whole new plethora of Starlink satellites, new and improved. But are yours about the size of that going up into space? Describe that.
They're actually about a sixth the size of a Starlink V2 Mini. Those are actually enormous. They're about 3 pallets stuck next to each other, and then quite thick as well. So our satellites are about a sixth the size, which is remarkable because SpaceX launched 3,800 Starlinks last year. So our satellites at a sixth the size, we could have launched 22,800 of our satellites with last year's Starlink launch rate.
Totally amazing. And now we get into the real meat of potatoes of the whole conversation. This is interesting to me. The U.S. Air Force Research Laboratory awards your company a specific amount of dollars in the development and others to, of course, launch your first satellite. Describe the satellite and give us the namesake of where it's coming from. It's kind of interesting. It ties into so much about when we talk about Tolkien and we talk about the whole story behind the name. Talk about the Lord of the Rings and the name of your satellite and the reason.
Yeah, if you remember in The Lord of the Rings, Frodo had the light of Arendelle in his pocket, and it was that little vial that was given to him by the elves, and he used it to scare away the spider Shelob in the third movie and protect himself. And I saw that as a kind of an inspiration, and our satellite is going to be very similar. It'll be a light for your darkest moments. And we can bring a full moon brightness to a terrifying area, even if you don't have anything on the ground. If you can just get a signal to us, we can light up the area around you so you can see and get to safety or get what you need to do done.
Sure.
So yeah, we named our satellite Arendelle 1. It's going to be as bright as a full moon when we turn it on over a specific area. And yeah, we're really excited to show people what that looks like with the first vehicle. Our second satellite's also called Arendelle 2, and we've actually finished building that one already. We haven't announced the launch yet. But yeah, we've got 2 of these built, and we're really excited about them. The Arendelle class vehicles are full moon brightness class vehicles, and we're going to make bigger, brighter satellites in the future and more satellites in the future. But these are the first ones, and so, yeah, we saw that as a fitting name.
So are these primarily, just so the audience understands, when you talk about dimensions and height above the Earth, these are traditionally in low Earth orbit, or is it a higher level that you go to, a higher orbital level? I think that needs to be explained and shared with the audience.
Yeah, these are at a 600-kilometer altitude, which is very similar to the altitude that Starlink flies at. It's a fair bit higher than the International Space Station. Those guys are down at around 400 kilometers. And this orbit is special. It's a very polar orbit, so it flies around the North and South Pole, kind of in a ring. It's not going around the equator. It's going vertical to that. And it's a special orbit that stays at the same angle from the sun as the Earth goes around the sun throughout the course of a year. So it basically stays there 90 degrees offset to the direction of the sun over the sunrise and sunset line. So if you kind of picture a ball, but in one side is in the sun and one side is shadowed, we're right over that line where it goes from sunlight to shadow. And we're over that all the time. So as the Earth goes around the sun throughout the course of the year, we're always over that shadow line. It's called a sun-synchronous orbit.
Interesting, but it's not one of the things, and you'd have to describe this to the audience, a Lagrange point. I mean, is it one of those like the James Webb, I understand, is that one of the Lagrange points? What is a Lagrange point so people understand the difference from what you're talking about?
This is much simpler than a Lagrange point. A Lagrange point is kind of like the perfect distance between the sun and the Earth and a little bit off to the side, where you're pulled just as much towards the sun as you're pulled towards the Earth. or you're a little bit behind the Earth and you're pulled as much away from the Earth due to centrifugal forces as you are towards the Earth due to gravity. These are incredibly difficult and incredibly nuanced, hard, complicated places to fly a satellite. So the James Webb did something incredibly complicated getting there and maintaining an orbit there. These sun-synchronous orbits over the Terminator are a lot closer and actually use the fact that the Earth is a little bit squashed out. It's a little bit like a flattened globe, and that oblateness pulls the orbit around a little bit. So it's
I kid myself, Ben, when I look in the mirror sometimes, and I'm a little more oblate around my own equator, but that's my problem to figure out. But it's true. The Earth is 7,927 miles wide, and I describe it, or this simpler way, I say 7,900 miles pole to pole, but the equatorial is about the length of a marathon, if you look at the Earth. So it's a slight oblateness, but it translates into a whole marathon distance, if you want to look at it that way. I thought that's a cute way to describe it, don't you think?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the other way to think about our orbit is if you blow up the Earth to the size of a basketball, we're about a quarter of an inch off of the surface, so we're quite close.
Yes, and for everybody listening that's concerned about the preservation of what Carl Sagan was talking about, the sanctity of the pale blue dot Earth, I describe this, and you could do a better job, I'm sure, in your way, that the thinness of the Earth's true atmosphere that we depend on, this troposphere, if you took an apple and hold it in your hand, let's say, in the theater of the mind, Ben, they're saying that it's the useful purpose of the atmosphere. The thickness is the thickness of the skin of the apple. So doesn't that mean, wow, we need to keep that, I think, for a long time. Don't cut that skin off the apple.
Absolutely. We'd end up like Mars.
Exactly. And that's a whole other. So we have a lot of fans that love the planet Mars, and we're going to continue to talk about great guests there. We were there at the University of Arizona when Curiosity went there. We were doing something with the Perseverance rover. But not to change the subjects too much from what we're here to talk with you about, the weather on Mars is obviously so dynamic and different that even if you were looking at the latest weather forecast, I don't have it in front of me, maybe the high of like 15 degrees Fahrenheit and a low night temperature of about 80 to 100 below zero Fahrenheit. Wow. And a carbon dioxide-based atmosphere, which is something totally alien. But I understand, and I'm way off subject here, there's a Chinese crypto billionaire, I don't have his name in front of me, I read this, see if you can corroborate it, that he's also now on the first scheduled mission to Mars that Elon has. This is in the future, a 2-year mission. That's amazing. So somebody's already signed up, and Elon has agreed. I guess he's paying his way. Isn't that incredible, Ben? That's wild.
Yeah, that is crazy. That'll be pretty cool. Yeah.
Imagine how would we handle 2 years if that's going. But it goes back to you, though, really quickly. Rocket propulsion right now. In the future iteration of rocket propulsion, we probably, no disrespect to you and your teams, we hopefully can get away from chemical rockets and do what? What would be some of the other iterations other than, say, nuclear?
Yeah, nuclear rockets are pretty cool. The one I'm really excited about is solar sailing, basically using light and the pressure from light to push a vehicle a little bit faster. Light obviously has no mass, but it does have momentum, and you can use that tiny little force to move quite fast. So if you build a gigantic laser on the Earth and a really big solar sail, you could theoretically get something moving really fast and get to another star system within a couple lifetimes, which is, there's no other way to move that fast.
Absolutely, at least not unless we watch the Star Treks and all the different iterations of it, warp speed. But I tell people this, and it's always nice to chime in with you, and people in the space know, that the speed of light, ladies and gentlemen, I think Ben would concur, is 670 million miles an hour. So if you think your Tesla Plaid is fast, or if you've been on fast jets, or if you're a military pilot, oh yeah, that's fast. Right, Ben? 670 million miles an hour. We haven't attained that anytime, at least not yet. We'll be back. Our special guest, Ben Nowak, his company. We're going to continue to take your phone calls at 1-800-848-9222. We have in the wings in the theater. One of the seats is now filled with Mike in St. James, and you, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Dr. Sky Experience. We'll return soon.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Listen closely to the cosmic wind. Every atom in our bodies was once part of a dying star. We are not just looking at the universe. We are the universe, looking back at itself, made of stardust, destined to return.
We are all made of stardust. 31 minutes after the hour, we continue with our special guest, Ben Nowak, and this company, Reflect Orbital, their website. We encourage you to check it out, reflectorbital.com. Continuing with our phone calls, we love those people in the theater of the mind. Let's welcome on line number 2, Mike. You're in St. James. You've been patient. Thanks for being on the air.
Thank you, Dr. Sky. I hope this question is relevant. I'd like to ask your guest if he foresees any increase in the construction and use of nuclear power plants in the USA.
Okay, fair question. A little off subject, but just the same. It has to do with propulsion? No, it has to do with nuclear and nuclear energy. What would you say to that, Ben, if you'd like to comment?
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who are building nuclear power plants. They've started companies and are doing a lot of hard work. Actually, 2 of my really good friends are building nuclear power plant companies. So I'm really excited to see that coming back. I think we need to build a lot more nuclear. I think we'll need a lot of other energy technologies as well, but nuclear is a great one.
We appreciate that. Thank you so much, Mike in St. James. Line number 3, Frank's been patient. He's in the Bronx. Good morning. You're on the air with Ben Nowak.
Hey, Dr. Sky. I want to talk about the rockets. What makes rockets so complicated to build? And do you share information with companies like Raytheon, the military, military provided build rockets for the military? How much do you work with them? So,
yeah, rockets are really hard to build. It's basically as hard of engineering as a Formula One car or harder. They have to be incredibly performant at extremely hot temperatures, made of extremely lightweight materials, as thin as possible, and pushed just to the absolute limit within an inch of braking. And that's the same for every single component, and very often the rockets will have a couple million components in them that all have to be designed to that level of rigor and that seriousness, and just tested, beaten to heck. They have to work in all situations. And yeah, that's just extremely hard to design for and build. And if you don't do all of that, the rocket will be too heavy and it won't even get off the launch pad.
Frank, you have a follow-up? We have some momentary time here. Just go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to know how much information are you able to share with the rocket providers that for the military, like Raytheon and General Dynamics and those kind of companies. Do they share information on how they build their rockets?
They build them in the same way that, a little, kind of an RC plane would be built. They build the engines in the same way that, a little either rocket engine would be built like a solid rocket motor or like a RC plane turbine engine or something like that. It's a lot of little metal parts, a lot of accuracy, a lot of testing. If you look up amateur rocketry, it's fairly similar to that. You'll see people building rockets of similar sizes, and obviously they don't have guidance systems, but they do have very performant engines, and they get up quite high in the atmosphere, and it's pretty cool. A lot of my friends are in amateur rocketry and have a good time launching their rockets up pretty high.
We started off in school with the little Estes rockets, and those were great. I mean, kids, obviously with adult supervision now, things have changed. You have to have the proper, guidance when you're going to launch them. But moving on, it's the thrill of a lifetime, right, for a young person, because they may become you one day, right? Or people like yourself that are doing this to do the real rocketry, as we call them, the real rocket scientists. Very interesting stuff. Let's continue here.
Rockets.
If you do have a question or comment, we still have some time. 1-800-848-9222. What I wanted to ask you, Ben, this is interesting. Talk about some of the other applications, because one of the big ones, I think, is your direct involvement with the solar industry, so that if you're looking to get maximum exposure to the solar power in the solar plant and the solar, the receivers that you have there, the solar panels. Talk about that a moment. That's interesting.
Yeah, we've all seen those giant solar farms out there in the desert where it's just miles and miles of solar panels. And during the day, they make a lot of really clean electricity. They're just using sunlight, which hits them and is free. And they're converting that into electricity, and it runs a lot of stuff. Actually, in California, it runs everything, or has the ability to run everything during the day. But as soon as the sun goes down, they stop working and make literally zero power. There's none of it coming out because there's no sunlight hitting those panels. And we actually have the ability to change that by reflecting sunlight that's missing the Earth out in space down onto these solar farms. And if you can get to the same amount of brightness as the sun, you get just as much power out of these panels as you do from the sun. And normally we'll be a little bit dimmer than that. But really, we have the ability to turn on these solar farms at night and continue producing electricity. And the reason that's a really big deal is you don't need to use natural gas or other energy technologies at night, which might not be as clean as that solar energy. We can just keep using that clean solar energy long into the night, all the way through the night. So I think it could be a real replacement for fossil fuels and potentially help us out with the climate crisis and, all this global warming that we see.
No, this is exciting. I mean, just listening to what you're saying here, look at all the possibilities of changing our world, which is so incredible to me. Give us an example. Let's say you're looking at a whole solar farm and you want to get maximum ability to charge up those panels. How long, you can dial up how long the exposure will be or the light coming down, or do you have to then wait and get the next one of the mirrors in line to continue? How long could you keep that going for any location if they want it?
Yeah, in 2030, we have this on our website. We want to get about 4,000 satellites up, and that'll give us the ability to provide a 20th normal sunlight for about 20 minutes. And then we'll keep launching satellites, and the way it works is one satellite hands it off to the next, or you have multiple satellites working together at the same time to get more brightness. So with both of those things combining together, because we have more satellites up, we'll be able to get about a third of normal sunlight brightness for about 3 hours in 2035, which increases the output of a solar farm by about 20%.
That's amazing. A really amazing technology. Line number 2, Pamela in New Jersey. She's calling us early in the morning. Good morning, Pamela. You're on with Ben Nowak. How you doing?
Good morning. Not to be a Debbie Downer, and you know me from my phone calls. My father was a mechanical genius, and I'm into education and everything. But I've lived for 6 decades, and I am seeing that we are so-called improving ourselves. When I had a very bad day today, I am the only one with plants in my yard. Everybody's filling their yards with cement.
I'm sorry,
in Clifton, New Jersey, they used to be known as the tree town. They had many farms. In fact, my father, as a kid, worked on one of the farms. And recently they wanted to take one of the co-ops away and build condos. It's being overbuilt. And today, somebody complained. Get this one.
Sure.
Somebody complained that I had a tree in my front yard that grew a little bit because of the rain. And I didn't get to trim it. And somebody complained. And I tell you, that just ruins your day. And you know,
it sure does, Pamela. And not to make not to make you feel depressed. Here in Arizona, they're overbuilding on every square inch. And the problem there, I think Ben would agree, when you're developing and covering everything in asphalt or cement, you're creating an even bigger heat island. But from your concerns, the poor little tree. See, that's terrible. Nobody should complain because we need that.
I had people actually coming by my property and saying, "What's this?" And then the inspector said, "Well, look at the weed. There was like one weed that grew, and I just trimmed it the other day." And they want you to grow your grass like.
It sounds not laughing at you, Pamela. Yeah, I know. Sounds like an HOA problem to me. There you go.
Humanity is very far from harmony with nature.
That's amazing, Pamela. No, I love your real, as we say, boots on the ground exposure here, but it's very sad. You're absolutely right. We want to continue to have our plants, and we want to have the nature that we enjoy, and we're obviously not getting that in many cases. But thank you, Pamela. I know. Sorry you had a bad day. I mean, seriously, that's terrible. And we're having a lot of heat here. We had 117 degrees here in Phoenix, which is just what? A mild heat. But it's comfortable. No, it's not. Pamela, thank you. God bless you. I hope your plants will continue to flourish. And maybe through Reflect Orbital, they'll send some light down. And what, Ben? Make the plants grow and keep the plants going. Very important. We continue. Line number 3, Fred in New Jersey. You're on as we talk with Ben Nowak. How you doing?
Dr. Sky, I'm 90 years of age, and I got no scientific education. But I wonder about the circumference of the Earth. From what I understand, it's about 24,000 miles. That's why every time it makes one revolution, we're in the same spot again. And I realize there's no wind because gravitational pull is controlling the atmosphere. But what about when they send a rocket up to go beyond the pull of gravity? I would think between there and space would be that 1,000-mile-an-hour wind.
Interesting. Ben? Wow. He brings up some very interesting points that even in the theater of the mind would probably need a chalkboard to explain this and demonstrate it in the visual world, but I know you can do that.
Yeah, most of the air, even really far away from the Earth, is moving at around the same speed as the Earth because there's no air beyond that to slow it down. So I think you're thinking in the right direction where, you have this Earth and it's spinning really fast. And, what about like as you get higher up, like what's that going to push off? Like what's going to slow that down? Well, there's actually nothing out there that would slow that air down. So it just keeps moving at the same speed as the Earth. And air is kind of sticky. If you stick your hand out the window, you can feel it. It has a real thickness to it and a real viscosity. And that atmospheric viscosity traces all the way up to the upper atmosphere and keeps those air molecules moving at around the same speed as the Earth is moving. So the rockets will encounter a little bit of that, that air as they get up there. But as they get into orbit, there's basically no air at all. It's extremely thin and fine, and you don't hit any of that fast moving air. But that said, it is at an extremely high temperature. So the average kinetic energy of those exoatmospheric molecules is extremely high. They're moving around really fast, but they're averaging to around the same location. They're not moving in one particular direction.
It's amazing. Fred, our goal has always been and shall continue to be. We all like to learn something new each week, and I hope, and I'm sure Ben has at least answered this question, something that we'd have to go back to school to study the details, but in this short version, we thank you so much, Fred, in New Jersey. This is interesting. We got about a minute or a half before we go to the next break, but I wanted you to just tell us quickly, what are some of the other amazing impacting things than projects that you're offering at Reflect Orbitals that people haven't heard so far?
Yeah, Dr. Scott, you mentioned the ability to grow plants. We do have that ability. We can help farmers get more nourishment out of the same acreage that they have. We can also keep crops from freezing if necessary. That's a really important one. Like if there's going to be a terrible frost or something like that, that'll kill a whole field of clementines. We can heat that up a little bit. Nominally, we won't be adding heat, but we can do it for critical emergencies like that.
Yeah, sure, because we hear about these deep freezes like in Florida, where you're right, the entire citrus crop could be just wiped off the earth and other areas. What about, of course, beautiful roses and other plants, let's say in Colombia or the locations around the world that grow beautiful flora? Maybe this could, not maybe, but definitely help and maintain the vitality of our plants and definitely keep it going. We'll be right back with Ben Nowak. It continues to the top of the hour, reflectorbital.com. And we see your calls coming in here. We see Robert in California, Mark in Pennsylvania, and Patrick in Manhattan, doing our best to get you into the theater of the mind and on the air. We'll be right back.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, this is astronaut Charlie Duke, 10th man to walk on the moon on Apollo 16 in April 1972. And it's a great thrill being on and listening to the Dr. Sky Show.
Charles Duke, the youngest of the astronauts that walked on the moon, and also the Capcom. When we heard that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin have landed on the moon, he was the capsule communicator a long time ago. We continue with our very special guest, and we continue with you, the callers, at 48 minutes after the hour. Line number 4, we go to Robert in California. Good morning. You're on with Ben Nowak. How you doing?
Hi, Dr. Sky. Thank you so much. I enjoy your show. You're an awesome guy, and I like Walter Sterling and Lionel. Those three guys are really getting me going. I love your shows.
Those guys are great. You bet.
Okay. Now, my question to your guest. I'm in space right now. I'm in the moon, okay? And there's 5 of us. One of them breaks a leg, and the other one has an appendicitis. How do we treat that? How are you going to do that?
Well, that's space medicine.
You have,
go ahead.
I think you got to go with the appendicitis case first. I don't know if he'll make it all the way back to the Earth. Broken leg, I feel like you could make it back to Earth with that just fine.
Right.
Yeah. I would try to fix the appendicitis, but that would be difficult. I think you'd have to do a little bit of surgery inside the capsule there.
Robert, any other comments? You bring up some good things, and we'll hopefully do some studies, that is, with guests with space medicine, too. Another great subject. You have another comment or question?
One more comment.
Go ahead.
When you get to space, I just landed in space about 10 hours ago. How do I know when it's nighttime, and when do I know when to go to sleep? Do I know when to wake up?
Yeah, one of the best questions I've ever heard, Ben. Go ahead.
On the moon, you have about 2 weeks of daytime and then about 2 weeks of nighttime. So you're going to have to check your watch. I don't know if you could sleep for 2 weeks straight or stay awake for 2 weeks straight. So you'll probably have to do what you do above the Arctic Circle and just look at a clock and put some blackout curtains over the windows or a little mask over your eyes so you can fall asleep on a normal 24-hour cycle.
Robert, thank you for the kind comments on the show, and appreciate you in California. You know, Ben, I'm going to be talking about this in a couple of weeks. You probably all have the details of this. But the SpaceX booster that's going to be intentionally impacted into the moon, we're going to do some television out here on that from the local stations. But that may be something that people who have a small to moderate-sized telescope could actually see the impactor, and we'll be talking about that. They're doing it for scientific purposes, not just to, dirty up the moon, as they say. But that's fascinating to hear in early August. I think it's the 5th, and we'll be reporting on that if you're aware of that one. That is interesting.
Yeah, super cool. I'm really excited about all the lunar missions that we're doing.
Let's go to line number 5 in time as we spend here with limited time. Mark in Pennsylvania, you are on the air. Good morning.
Hi there. I wish my cell phone battery's in the red, so I'll try to hurry up here. In 6th grade, we had a project in science class. We all built Estes rockets. And I had a record. I had a rocket called the Mark, or either that was the engine size or the... Anyway, it was good, and it parachuted and landed. But I wanted to get to... I had a friend that worked for Westinghouse 50 years ago, and he was bringing home these solar chips that were broke, and my brother soldered them all together to get like 9 volts. And we hooked it up to an AM radio, which was really cool. And then as time got on, nowadays, in the last 10 years, I've been doing a lot with solar panels that power up and recharge your garage door security lights to go on. And I've been hooking up a lot of AM radios, and I even hooked up a set of cheap walkie-talkies. And it's pretty cool. Gilligan's Island would have had these chips. Of course, that radio, I don't know how they kept them batteries going.
That's science fiction to them, you bet. Yeah.
But,
interesting, Mark.
That's pretty much it. And very interesting program. I tuned in late here in the last 20 minutes and been watching a lot of videos on my other smartphone. But it's very interesting. Like I say, I've called in before and talked to you about my brother worked at Goldstone. And,
yes, I remember you. Yes, absolutely.
And my brother, he was the genius of it all. He did the ham radios and still has his license and worked for the Army with radio-controlled airplanes. And he took the whole thing out and would make light shows. They had like 17 different programs, and he said radio-controlled airplanes that they would shoot down for target practice, and they had a wooden propeller that he would acquire and send home somehow, and we still have it. It's got red tips, and it's made out of wood.
Well, Mark, not to cut you short, we do want to continue with other callers, but no, your story is very interesting, and maybe a quick response, if Ben would like to, about everything from rigging up and doing all this, because you have to by trial and error. And obviously the whole story of engineering is many times they fail, but you keep going back until you get it right. Right, Mark?
Yeah, solar sails are amazing pieces of technology. I built a lot of little projects with them when I was growing up, just power and LEDs and little cars and things like that. And I grew up building and flying RC airplanes as well, just for fun. I did it in middle school and high school a lot. I'd put little cameras on them so I could fly down cliffs and watch what was going on, and I'd make little videos about it. So, yeah, I've had a ton of fun with all that technology.
And look at where you are now. You're developing the real deal from all the experimenting. And that's why I give a lot of my time to a lot of the students out there. We talk about the necessity for science. We talk about critical thinking and how people like yourselves, out there in the radio world, your children, your grandchildren, they should have the opportunity to be able to do the things that we talk about before, right? Imagine, believe, and achieve. Very important. We close out the show by going to line number 2. Patrick in Manhattan, you've been patient, and you're on with Ben Nowak. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing very well, Dr. Sky. Thank you. Thank you for taking the call. Avid listener. I do overnight work, and I look forward to your show.
Thank you.
And you always have great callers. My question, I'm going to go quick. I know you're short on time. I'm curious about the operation of rockets in space outside an atmosphere when there's no air or atmosphere. And if you get to the second question, that's fine. There seems to be a lot of satellites going up, and we're being told over and over that there's a lot of space junk out there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious how they don't come in contact with each other. I don't remember there was a great Saturday Night Live show with Belushi, where Skylab was coming down to Earth. They didn't know where it was coming.
Sure. I remember it. Patrick, I remember it. We had a big event in New Jersey, not to take away from Ben's time, but we had a big event at a theater in Paramus, New Jersey. This is not a joke, and I was a lot younger. And we had outside, there was a movie, the first iteration of Alien. So we had this thing where they actually promoted an event, See Skylab, before it passed and, entered the atmosphere. So this is very interesting, Ben. And we had 5,000 people. We made the cover of, some of the news over there, and TV covered it. It was amazing because what we saw, Patrick and Ben, is we saw the thing going across the sky as if it was wobbling a little bit. But I'll never forget that. But you have the floor, Ben, because we're almost out of time, and I want to thank Patrick. Give us a quick summation of the things that you're doing over there at Reflect Orbital, and again, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So the way the spacecraft moves around is with a rocket engine. That's how we dodge space debris. That's also how we deorbit our spacecraft when it's done with its mission. Very similar to Skylab. We just, come down in altitude until the atmosphere starts slowing us down, and then we burn up or we re-enter purposefully at a particular location. So that's how all that works. We can move around with reaction wheels and magnet torquers and all kinds of things like that. And what we do is we point a reflection of sunlight onto a specific area, either for an emergency responder or a crew that's working at night, very similar to you, Patrick, in Manhattan. We could light up a whole area like construction lights at night if you're working on something that's really big and outside. And then we can also use it to provide clean energy by lighting up solar farms at night and allowing them to produce power when otherwise they'd be sitting dormant. And we do all that with a company called Reflect Orbital. You can look us up on reflectorbital.com, and there's a little thing to contact us and get in touch if you have an application for sunlight and you're interested in talking to us. We're launching our first satellites pretty soon here, coming up this fall. We're super excited about it, and we'll be doing demonstrations all around the world, showing people what we can do, and then building the constellation from there.
Well, let's have you back, and I hope you'll agree to do that as the satellite goes into orbit and all the things go from drawing board to reality. And it's amazing, the stuff that we're hearing, ladies and gentlemen, with our good friend Ben Nowak, again, CEO and co-founder of Reflect Orbital. Got about a minute. Talk about your co-founder for a minute, because he's not here to talk about himself and the importance of him in developing your company. He should be mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tristan built the delivery droid, and I heard we were talking about drones a little bit earlier on one of the commercials. And yeah, Tristan built the little delivery droid at a company called Zipline. So they started by delivering blood and medical products in Rwanda and Ghana and African nations for emergencies. If somebody gave birth and they were letting out a lot of blood, Zipline would show up with a bag of blood and help save a life. And they're bringing that same technology to food delivery. They're starting out in Texas, and they're bringing it to more and more cities around the U.S. and around the world. And Tristan was one of the instrumental folks building those components. We met at Zipline. I also worked there for a little bit. And since then, we've been working together on Reflect Orbital. We've been doing everything together, from some of the early demonstrations to a lot of the fundraising that we've done, building the team, keeping the team focused and excited and all of that. And yeah, it's just been a blast to build it with somebody who's such a good friend.
Well, thank you for your time. It's a privilege and honor. We hope to have you back if you'll agree to that. And again,
Absolutely.
Ben Nowak, CEO and co-founder, ReflectOrbital.com. They are taking things from the drawing board into space. They are a funded company. This is not pie in the sky. Imagine, believe, and achieve. The things we talk about here, to the positivity. And ladies and gentlemen, excuse me, stay tuned to WABC for another side of midnight as Lionel takes us into the early morning hours during the dog days of summer. The heat bubble continues. We can only guess what the temperatures in Phoenix will be, maybe approaching an all-time temperature of 122 degrees. We'll keep you posted. And thanks to our helmsmen, Bill and Ian, for making sure that you're heard loud and clear in the theater of the mind. We'll see you next week with great guests. Dr. Sky at WABCRadio.com is my email. Use it often, and I do respond. Clear skies and good health. We'll see you soon.